My name is Clara Williams, and the most devastating betrayal of my life came not from strangers or enemies, but from the very people I thought were my family. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, a day I thought would bring me joy. I had picked up my phone to ask my son Ethan when his wedding ceremony would be, expecting to hear excitement in his voice, maybe even a warm invitation. But instead, his fiancée, now wife Maria, looked me in the eye with a smile that felt like shards of glass and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words didn't just sting, they split me wide open. Special people. For 3 years I had paid their rent, month after month without fail. I had filled their refrigerator when they had nothing. I had bought every piece of furniture in their small apartment. I had given up my own comforts, vacations, hobbies, even little pleasures like a nice dinner out, so that Ethan and Maria could live with dignity. And yet, according to Maria, I was not a special person. I stood in my own living room, clutching the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Ethan avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the carpet as though guilt could erase the damage. Maria sat smugly on the sofa I had bought for them, as though she owned the world. Upstairs in my closet hung the pale pink dress I had chosen for the wedding, alongside new shoes, both purchased with money I couldn't really spare, but gave happily because I thought I would stand proudly in the photographs of my only son's wedding day. I imagined myself smiling in those pictures, surrounded by family, with proof that my sacrifices had been worth it. But there would be no pictures, at least none with me in them. Before I take you deeper into this story, I want to pause for a moment and ask you something. If you're watching this video right now, don't scroll away. Please stay with me until the end, because you will not believe how it all turned around. And while you're here, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story travels, and your support means more to me than you know. Now, let me take you back to the moment my heart shattered. I had spent weeks preparing for that wedding. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, imagining the couple might come by afterward to celebrate. I had carefully saved $1,000 in cash as a wedding gift, money I had tucked into an envelope with Ethan's name written in my best handwriting. I wanted to give it to them with pride, to show that even though I was older, even though I lived alone, I could still be part of their joy. All of it collapsed in a single moment, crushed under those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. And the worst part? The lie they told me to cover their cruelty. Ethan finally looked up, his voice flat as if rehearsed. "Mom, it was just a very small thing. Intimate. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew better. I had seen the photos on social media later that night, glowing on my computer screen like daggers. Maria's parents stood proudly on either side of them, her siblings toasted with champagne. There was laughter, music, and light, everything I thought I'd be part of. And the white gown Maria wore? I had unknowingly paid for part of it, handing her $800 for personal expenses just a month before. That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the wooden table where so many of my sacrifices had been planned. This was the same table where I had once counted coins to make sure Ethan had lunch money for school. The same table where I had cried silently when bills piled too high after his father passed away. And now it was the place where my illusions came to die. I began replaying the years of sacrifice in my mind, every detail cutting deeper than the last. Rent, $500 a month, every month for 3 years. Groceries, $200 a month, sometimes more. Furniture, repairs, car loans, emergencies that always seemed to pop up right before payday. The math swirled in my head like a storm. I had eaten beans and rice to make those payments. I had canceled doctor's appointments for myself, convincing my aching knees that they could wait another month, because Ethan and Maria needed the money more. I had clipped coupons until my fingers ached, all so they could live in comfort. And for what? To be erased from the most important day of my only son's life. My chest burned with humiliation. My hands shook as I scrolled through Maria's Facebook album again and again, staring at her smug smile, her family's laughter, the champagne glasses raised high. Not one seat had been left empty for me. Not one hand had reached out to say, "Where is Clara? Shouldn't she be here?" I thought of the countless nights I had told myself that all my sacrifices would pay off in the end, that Ethan would one day understand, that Maria would come to appreciate me, that love would bloom stronger because of everything I had given. But sitting there, staring at my reflection in the dark window, I finally asked myself the question I had avoided for years. What if I was never anything more than their ATM with feelings? The tears came then, but they weren't soft tears of sadness. They were hot, angry tears that seared my cheeks. I wept not just for the wedding I had been excluded from, but for the woman I had allowed myself to become, someone who begged for scraps of affection by paying bills that weren't hers. Someone who believed that love could be bought at the price of self-destruction. When I finally stumbled to bed that night, my pillow damp beneath my face, I whispered into the darkness, "No more." The next morning, I stood before the bathroom mirror. My reflection was the same. The lines etched by years of sacrifice, the tired eyes of a woman who had given too much. But behind those eyes, something new flickered. Anger, yes, but also something sharper. Determination. I brewed my coffee slowly, deliberately, savoring each step. I didn't check my phone for messages from Ethan. I didn't hope for Maria's apology. I simply sat at my table, steam rising around me, and let the silence wrap me in something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. If I was not special enough for them, then maybe it was finally time to be special enough for myself. And though I didn't yet know how, I felt it in my bones. This was only the beginning. The days after the wedding, humiliation felt like moving through quicksand. Everything around me looked the same walls, the same furniture, the same old photographs of Ethan as a boy, but the air was heavier, thicker, as though my house itself was pressing in on me, reminding me of what I had lost. I couldn't step into the kitchen without seeing that pink dress hanging uselessly in my closet. I couldn't sit on the sofa without remembering Maria lounging there smugly, daring me to confront her. Even my own reflection in the hallway mirror seemed to accuse me of foolishness. I had to confront the truth I had been avoiding for years. I had been financing their lives at the cost of my own. For 3 long years, I was not living for myself. I was existing to keep Ethan and Maria afloat. And the shocking realization was that I had done it willingly, even proudly, because I thought that was what love looked like. That week, I pulled out all my old bank statements and laid them across the dining room table. The sight of those papers, line after line of transfers, withdrawals, checks written in shaky handwriting, was almost enough to make me sick. I sat down with a pen and notebook, determined to tally it all. Rent, $500 every month, for 36 months, $18,000. Groceries and emergency supplies, at least $200 a month, another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas, anniversaries boxes checked on a calendar, each one another withdrawal from my account, $3,000 at the very least. Maria's so-called medical emergencies, an $800 bill she swore she couldn't cover. The car loan I co-signed, $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $600. The furniture set they just had to have for their living room, $1,200. When I added it all up, the number glared back at me like a cruel joke, $33,400. $33,400 siphoned out of my life. Money that should have been used for my retirement, for travel, for enjoying the golden years my late husband Robert always told me I deserved. Money I had promised myself I would use to finally rest after decades of raising a child alone, working long shifts, and clipping coupons to keep food on the table. But instead of freedom, I had bought chains. I sat there staring at the final number and whispered aloud, "Clara, you've been buying scraps of affection at full price." The sound of my own voice in the silent house startled me. It was raw, broken, but it was also true. I thought back to the little ways I had deprived myself for them. The vacations I didn't take because Ethan and Maria needed help with a deposit. The dinners I skipped because Maria had called in tears about another overdue bill. The new coat I didn't buy last winter because I felt guilty spending money on myself when they were struggling. And the nights I went to bed hungry, telling myself I wasn't really hungry, that tea and toast would be enough, so I could wire $200 more for their groceries. I remembered a night last winter when my heater broke. I had sat wrapped in 3 blankets, shivering in my living room, because I told myself the repair could wait. Ethan had asked for help with a credit card bill, and I couldn't say no. Maria had called me crying, saying they were drowning, and so I transferred the money. My own comfort was secondary. And still, it was never enough. One memory after another clawed at me, pulling me deeper into regret. Maria's voice echoing in my ear. "Clara, you're like a second mom to me." Ethan's voice on the phone. "Mom, we just need a little more time." The way they had both smiled when I handed them envelopes of cash, smiles that melted away the second the money was gone. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in family ties, and I had fallen for it every time. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not just at them but at myself. How had I allowed this? When did I start believing that love had to be earned with dollar signs? When did I confuse being needed with being loved? I went to bed each night with those questions echoing in my head, but the answers never came. Instead, I woke up every morning to the dull ache of humiliation, a bruise that wouldn't fade. And then, exactly 1 week after Maria told me I wasn't special, the phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. For a moment, my heart betrayed me. A tiny flicker of hope sparked. Maybe she was calling to apologize, to finally admit she had been wrong, to invite me to a belated celebration. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was shaky, frantic. "Clara, the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." I froze, the words slamming into me like cold water. You forgot to make the transfer. As though it were my duty, my obligation. As though I were their personal bank account, malfunctioning for the first time in years. I let the silence stretch, savoring the way panic crept into her tone. I thought of all the mornings I had run to the bank before it closed, sacrificing my own errands, my own needs. I thought of the dinners I had canceled with friends, ashamed to admit I couldn't afford them because Ethan and Maria had needed me. I thought of the endless times I had told myself, "This is what mothers do." Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, almost cold. "Maria, didn't I tell you? I only help special people." The silence on the line was deafening. I could almost hear her heartbeat quickening, almost see the fear in her eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't trembling. She was. "Clara, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." The words were hollow, worn thin from overuse. Lies, coated in sugar. I could hear the manipulation dripping through every syllable. I ended the call without another word. My finger pressed the button, and just like that, the cord tying me to them began to fray. That night, I cried again. But these weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of release, washing away the years of guilt, the years of being invisible. I cried for the mother who thought she had to pay for love. I cried for the woman who had convinced herself that deprivation was devotion. I cried for all the times I put myself last, begging for a seat at a table that was never mine. And when the tears dried, something stronger took their place. Resolve. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection was the same, a 71-year-old woman with lines on her face and gray in her hair, but my eyes were different. Behind them, there was fire. I brewed my coffee slowly, deliberately. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for Ethan's apologies or Maria's excuses. I simply sat at my kitchen table and whispered to myself, "If they don't see my worth, then I will." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The following week, the storm I had been sensing finally broke. I should have known that Ethan and Maria wouldn't simply disappear after my refusal. People who grow accustomed to feeding on another's sacrifice don't stop out of gratitude, they escalate. It started subtly. My phone rang constantly, Ethan's name flashing across the screen in rapid succession. I let it ring. Then Maria's voice filled my voicemail. "Clara, please, this isn't you. You're under stress. Let's just talk." Her words oozed with false tenderness, the same syrupy tone she always used when money was at stake. I deleted every message. But they didn't stop there. One afternoon, when the air outside was heavy with the smell of summer rain, I turned onto my street and felt my chest seize. 3 cars were parked in front of my house. Ethan's black sedan, Maria's compact hatchback, and a sleek gray BMW I didn't recognize. My porch light was on, though I hadn't switched it. My stomach churned. I unlocked the door, my keys trembling in my hand, and stepped inside. The sight before me stole my breath. Ethan sat hunched on my sofa, his face buried in his hands like a child caught doing something wrong. Maria paced back and forth across the hardwood floor, heels clicking with each turn, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. And at my dining table, the very table where I had once planned Ethan's birthday parties, where Robert and I had shared family dinners, sat a stranger in a tailored gray suit. He was calmly leafing through my personal documents as though he owned them. My voice cut through the silence, sharper than I intended. "What is happening here?" All three froze. Maria was the first to recover, plastering on that mask of false concern. "Clara, thank God you're here. We were worried. This is Mr. Fisher, a family law attorney. He's here to help with your situation." I blinked, stunned. "My situation? What situation?" Ethan lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot, his voice carefully rehearsed. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers. Mr. Klein said you even blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you'd do that." The man in the gray suit stood, extending his hand like a vulture offering a deal. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Dr. Fisher. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being. They asked me to review your finances to ensure you're still capable of managing your affairs." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I strode to the table, snatched up every piece of paper he'd dared to touch, and clutched them to my chest. "These are my private documents. You have no right to look at them." "Mom," Ethan interjected, using that infuriatingly patronizing tone. "We're worried. You've been acting strange, cutting us off suddenly, ignoring our calls. Maybe you just need some professional help." Maria stepped closer, her voice dripping with sugar. "Clara, sweetheart, loneliness at your age can cloud judgment. Confusion is normal. We're only here because we care." Confusion. That word rang in my ears like a gunshot. I finally understood their plan. This wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't even about guilt. They were laying the groundwork to have me declared mentally incompetent, to strip me legally of the right to control my own life. I drew myself up, every ounce of anger crystallizing into steel. "I am not confused," I said, each word deliberate. "I am clearer than I've been in years. And right now I am very clear that you will all leave my house." Fisher's face tightened, though his voice stayed polished. "Mrs. Williams, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a duty to intervene if they believe your decisions endanger you. We've already documented concerning behaviors." I laughed loud, bitter, unrestrained. "Concerning behaviors? You mean deciding that my money belongs to me? Choosing not to bankroll two grown adults who treat me like I'm disposable? That's your evidence?" Maria's mask cracked, her voice sharp. "We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process." The words dropped like ice into my veins. There it was, the truth without disguise. I wasn't their mother. I wasn't family. I was a future inheritance, an obstacle standing between them and the money they thought they were owed. "Out," I said, pointing to the door. "All of you, out of my house." Ethan shot to his feet, face red, jaw tight. "Mom, we can't just leave. You're being unreasonable. The rent, the car, the credit cards, we have obligations. You can't just cut us off." I stepped forward, my voice rising with a force I hadn't felt in years. "Who says I can't? For years I paid rent on an apartment that wasn't mine. I filled a fridge in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that excluded me from its most sacred moments. And now, you dare to tell me what I can and cannot do with my money?" Fisher reached into his briefcase and produced a folder, sliding it onto the table like it was a prize. "Mrs. Williams, this is a temporary power of attorney. It would allow your children to manage your finances until you're feeling better. A simple safeguard. All you need to do is sign." I picked up the folder, glanced at the neat black letters, and without hesitation tossed it straight into the trash. The thud echoed like a gunshot. "The only thing I'm signing today is your exit." Maria's eyes filled with tears, though I saw the rage simmering beneath. "You can't do this to us, Clara. We made plans based on your support. We counted on you." "Then you counted wrong," I snapped. "You counted on my money, not on my love. You counted on my silence, not my dignity, and that account is closed." Ethan softened his voice, his last desperate card. "Mom, the wedding was a mistake. Maria was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable again." Reasonable. The word tasted like ash. Being reasonable means letting you drain me dry. It means pretending I don't care that you erased me from my own son's wedding. It means ignoring the humiliation of being told I'm not special. No, Ethan, I've been too reasonable for too long. Fisher snapped his briefcase shut. His smile was gone now, his words edged. Mrs. Williams, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you continue to make irrational decisions, a judge can appoint a guardian. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. Do your research, doctor. For 40 years, I've managed my finances without flaw. I raised my son alone after my husband died. I worked until retirement, paid every bill, every tax. And yes, I foolishly financed the lives of 2 adults who saw me as a paycheck. But if you think I'll hand over my freedom now, you are gravely mistaken. Maria wiped her tears, her voice flat, cold. This won't stay like this, Clara. We have rights, and we have lawyers. Perfect, I said, holding the door wide. Pay them with your own money. Mine is off the table. They shuffled out, stiff with indignation. At the threshold, Ethan turned back, his voice low with menace. Mom, this will end badly for you. You'll wind up alone, with no one to take care of you. My heart cracked, but my voice stayed firm. I'm already alone, Ethan. The difference is, this time, it's by choice, not neglect. The door slammed shut. Silence filled my house, heavy at first, then lighter. For the first time in years, silence wasn't loneliness, it was freedom. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. If they wanted a war for my life, they just declared it. And I was ready to fight. The morning after I kicked Ethan and Maria out of my house, I woke up with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration running through my veins. Fear, because I knew they wouldn't stop at manipulation, they had already escalated to legal threats. Exhilaration, because for the first time in years, I had stood my ground. My hands still trembled when I thought about Fisher's smirk, his warning about guardianship, but underneath that tremor was a pulse of iron resolve. They would not win. I brewed coffee as sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains. I didn't even look at my phone. I knew it would be flooded with missed calls and texts. Instead, I called someone else. Mr. Walker, an attorney I'd met years ago when Robert's will was processed. He had an impeccable reputation in our town, not the kind of slick opportunist Maria had dragged into my dining room. When he answered, his voice was steady, kind. Mrs. Williams, it's been a long time. What can I do for you? I hesitated only a second before the dam broke. The whole story spilled out: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the years of financial drain, the ambush with Fisher, the threats about my competency. By the end, my throat was raw, and my hands were gripping the receiver so tightly my knuckles ached. Mr. Walker was silent for a long moment, then sighed. Clara, I'm sorry you've been through this, but let me be clear. What your son and daughter-in-law are doing is elder financial abuse. It's more common than you think, and it is a federal crime. The fact that they entered your home without permission and went through your papers, that's breaking the law. You are not powerless here. The word abuse hit me like a hammer. I had always framed it as sacrifice, as generosity gone too far, but hearing it named for what it was lit a fire in me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't me being too nice. It was abuse, plain and simple. First, Mr. Walker continued, we document everything, every transfer, every gift, every emergency. You've been generous, but we need to prove just how much. Second, we secure your finances, new locks, new accounts, full separation. Third, we prepare for escalation. If they try for guardianship, we'll be ready. For the next 3 hours, I sat in his office with stacks of papers spread around us like battlefield maps. He whistled low when he tallied the totals. $33,400. Clara, with this, you could have traveled the world. Instead, you financed their lives while they excluded you from their wedding. A judge will see this for what it is. I left his office with a folder in my purse and a plan in my heart. Step 1. Protect myself. I drove straight to the hardware store, a place I had only ever visited for Ethan and Maria's emergencies. The owner, Mr. Summers, greeted me warmly. Clara, what broke this time? The kids' place again. I shook my head, surprising even myself with the firmness of my tone. No, Mr. Summers, this time it's for my house. I need new locks, the best ones you've got. He raised his eyebrows but didn't question me. As I was choosing locks, his son Ethan, not my Ethan, but the younger man who worked with him came over. "Mrs. Williams, I install security systems. Cameras, alarms, full setup. Do you want peace of mind?" Peace of mind. The phrase settled into me like a promise. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I do." That evening, as I ate takeout Chinese food at my kitchen table, a small rebellion against years of frugality, I felt my phone vibrate again. This time, an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but curiosity got the better of me. "Clara." Maria's voice flowed through the line, honey, coated but trembling underneath. "Please don't hang up. We need to talk like adults. Ethan and I made a mistake with the wedding. We want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner, just us to celebrate together? We can even cook at your house, like old times." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Maria, how much rent do you owe right now?" Silence. Then a hesitant, 2 months, $1,000. "But Clara, this isn't about money." "It's always about money," I cut her off. "If I'm so important, why wasn't I important enough to sit at my own son's wedding? Why am I only important when bills are due?" Her silence confirmed what I already knew. I ended the call. The next morning, Ethan and Mr. Summers arrived bright and early to change my locks and install cameras. As they worked, I felt both sick and relieved. Sick because I needed to guard myself from my own child. Relieved because, for once, I wasn't leaving myself vulnerable. Later that day, I met my neighbor Eleanor. She had lived next door for years, but we'd rarely spoken beyond polite greetings. When she saw me outside, she walked over, concern etched on her face. "Clara, are you all right?" I heard shouting the other night. Something inside me cracked open. I invited her in and told her everything. She listened quietly, eyes glistening with sympathy. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter. She only called when she needed money. When I finally cut her off, she screamed, threatened, tried to shame me. But after months, she came back not because of money, but because she realized I wasn't her ATM. She realized I was her mother." Her words settled deep in my chest. Maybe there was hope. Or maybe not. But at least I knew I wasn't alone. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something had shifted. My son and his wife could try to paint me as unstable, confused, unfit. But I had allies. I had evidence. And I had something they didn't. The truth. I drifted off to sleep with one thought echoing in my mind. If they wanted a legal war, I was ready. The day of the trial felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with a storm raging below. For weeks, I had prepared myself gathering documents, meeting with Mr. Walker, writing down every transfer, every humiliation, every detail of the abuse. But nothing could erase the weight in my chest as I stepped into that courthouse. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about my freedom. It was about reclaiming my dignity as a woman, a mother, a human being. Mr. Walker met me at the entrance. He was calm, steady, the kind of presence that reminded me of Robert in his strongest days. "Clara," he said, squeezing my arm, "remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove incompetence. We only need to show that you are capable, and you are." I nodded, clutching the folder that contained my life in numbers. $33,400 in sacrifices that had bought me nothing but betrayal. Inside the courtroom, I saw Ethan immediately. He was dressed in a new navy suit, his tie perfectly knotted. His eyes darted away from mine the moment they met. Maria sat beside him in a black dress, her expression a carefully rehearsed mask of sorrow. Their lawyer, an older man with a silver tie and the smugness of someone who thought he'd already won, whispered to them as if giving last-minute stage directions. The trial began with their opening statement. Their lawyer's voice dripped with feigned concern. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case, Mrs. Williams has always been generous, but recently she has shown alarming changes in behavior. She has cut off all financial support for her family without warning, isolated herself, installed unnecessary security systems, and become increasingly paranoid. These are not the actions of a rational woman. We are here to request guardianship, not out of greed, but out of love and duty to ensure she is protected." I wanted to laugh, but the words burned instead. Love and duty. The same people who had told me I wasn't special enough for their wedding were now painting themselves as selfless caretakers. Then came their witnesses. Maria took the stand first. She cried delicately, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Clara was like a second mother to me, but lately she's changed. She lashes out, refuses to answer our calls, isolates herself. We're so worried. She even accused us of using her. It's heartbreaking to see her decline. Mr. Walker's cross-examination cut through her performance like a scalpel. Mrs. Davis, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money? Maria hesitated. Well, we always talked about many things. A date, please. I don't remember exactly. Is it true you and your husband held a wedding without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true? When she asked why she wasn't invited, you told her only special people were included? Maria's face flushed crimson. Those words were taken out of context. What possible context could make that acceptable? The courtroom murmured. Maria's eyes dropped to her lap. Ethan was next. My heart ached watching him raise his right hand and swear to tell the truth. This was the boy I had once rocked to sleep, the boy who had called me his hero. And now he stood ready to strip me of my freedom. My mother has always been generous, he said, his voice steady. But in recent months, she's become irrational. She cut us off with no explanation. We think she's being manipulated by outsiders who are taking advantage of her confusion. Mr. Walker stepped forward. Mr. Davis, how much money has your mother given you in the last 3 years? Ethan shifted in his seat. I don't know the exact amount. Would $33,400 sound about right? Maybe. How many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money? Silence. Is it true that you and your wife entered her home without permission and reviewed her private papers with a lawyer? We were worried about her. Is it true you pressured her to sign a power of attorney granting you access to her accounts? We wanted to help her manage things. Mr. Davis, you are 35 years old. Do you believe it is your 71-year-old mother's responsibility to pay your rent? Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. The rest of their witnesses fared no better. A neighbor, Mr. Davis from across the street, claimed I had been acting strange installing cameras, raising my voice. But under questioning, he admitted he had never spoken to me directly and was merely speculating. My pharmacist, Mr. Green, admitted he had been tricked into signing a vague statement by Maria, not realizing its purpose. Their so-called expert psychiatrist had never met me, only reviewed secondhand claims. Then it was our turn. Mr. Walker called Eleanor first. She testified about our many conversations, about my clarity of mind, my independence, my ability to maintain friendships. She is sharper than many women half her age, Eleanor declared, and for the first time in years, she is truly living. My stylist, Cynthia, took the stand, describing how I had returned to her salon, how I was investing in myself again. Even Mr. Summers from the hardware store testified that I had come in, clear-headed and decisive, to change my locks and install cameras, not out of paranoia, but prudence. Finally, Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist who had evaluated me, presented her findings. Mrs. Williams displays no signs of cognitive decline. On the contrary, her test scores are well above average for her age. She is fully capable of managing her affairs. And then it was my turn. I rose slowly, every step heavy with 71 years of life. When I sat at the witness stand, I looked at the judge, not at Ethan or Maria. My voice was steady, though my heart thundered. Your Honor, I began, for 3 years I gave my son and his wife everything I had. Rent, groceries, gifts, emergencies. Over $33,000. I lived on beans and rice so they could eat steak. I canceled doctor's appointments for myself so I could pay their bills. And how did they repay me? By excluding me from their wedding, by telling me I wasn't special enough to be there. And when I finally said no, when I finally put myself first, they tried to declare me incompetent. I paused, letting the silence sink in. This isn't about my mental health. This is about money, and my choice not to give it away anymore. When their lawyer cross-examined me, he tried to trip me up with complicated questions about my finances. I answered each one clearly, confidently. He tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me. I told him, for the first time in years, my relationships are based on respect, not money. The closing arguments were a blur, but I remember Mr. Walker's voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Your Honor, this is not the case of a confused old woman. This is the case of a mother who finally found the strength to stop decades of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no credible medical evidence. They've presented frustration, entitlement, and greed. Nothing more. The judge retired for deliberation. 2 hours later, he returned. My breath caught in my throat as he spoke. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that Mrs. Clara Williams is in full possession of her faculties. Professional evaluations confirm her competence. Her financial decisions are rational and within her rights. This court denies the request for guardianship. Furthermore, the court recognizes potential elder financial abuse and advises Mrs. Williams to pursue protective measures. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. I had won. Ethan's face crumpled in anger. Maria's eyes blazed with hatred, but I barely saw them. Relief washed over me like sunlight after years of darkness. For the first time in so long, I felt free. The day after the verdict, I woke up before dawn, light filtering softly through my curtains. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of dread pressing down on my chest. I sat up slowly, realizing that the silence in my house had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore, wasn't the silence of abandonment or fear. It was peace. It was mine. The victory in court wasn't just legal, it was spiritual. I had stood in front of a judge, in front of strangers, in front of my own son, and I had said the words I once thought I'd never have the courage to speak. No more. I wasn't incompetent. I wasn't confused. I wasn't paranoid. I was simply a woman who had given too much for too long and finally decided to reclaim her life. Ethan and Maria disappeared from my doorstep after that day, at least physically. I heard through whispers in the neighborhood that they had been forced to move into a smaller apartment. Maria had finally found a job. Ethan was scrambling to pick up extra work. They were surviving, but without my lifeline, their world had shrunk. Did I feel pity? A little, but not enough to regret. Because pity was the very thing that had shackled me for years. Instead of pity, I felt freedom. I sold the house not long after the trial. It was too full of memories, both sweet and bitter, the echoes of Ethan's childhood laughter. Yes, but also the sharp sting of his betrayal. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to the city, with bright windows and a little balcony where I could drink coffee in the morning Sunday. It was the kind of place Robert and I had once dreamed of retiring in together. With the money I had saved by no longer financing Ethan and Maria, I began to live for myself. I took art classes at the community center, rediscovering the joy of painting flowers, landscapes, little pieces of beauty that reminded me of life's color. I booked a trip to Italy, something Robert and I had always talked about. Standing in Florence, gazing up at the Duomo, I whispered his name into the sky and felt as though he were smiling beside me. I joined a garden club with Eleanor and made friends with women who had walked paths like mine. We laughed, we shared stories, we reminded each other that love without respect isn't love at all. For the first time, I had a community that saw me as Clara, not as a wallet, not as an obligation, but as a woman worth knowing. And on quiet evenings, I found peace in small things. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the soft touch of a new blanket I bought without guilt, the laughter of neighbors' children echoing in the courtyard. Little reminders that life still had sweetness to offer, even after decades of bitterness. Sometimes I wondered if Ethan would ever call not for money, not for help, but to say, "Mom, I'm sorry. Mom, I love you." Maybe he would one day, maybe he wouldn't. But for the first time, I understood that my happiness didn't depend on it. His choices were his own. Mine, finally, were mine. One evening, as I painted on my balcony, Eleanor came over with a pot of tea. She sat beside me, watching the brush move across the canvas. "Clara," she said softly, "you look younger." I laughed. "You need new glasses." "No, I mean it. It's like you've been carrying 50 pounds on your back, and someone finally took it off." She was right. That's what freedom felt like, lightness. And maybe the most important lesson of all was this. I had spent years believing I had to buy love, that giving and giving would someday earn me a seat at the table. But true love doesn't come with receipts. True love doesn't measure itself in rent checks and grocery bills. Love, real love, is free. And if it has to be purchased, it isn't love at all. So now, I live differently. I spend money on myself without shame. I invest in my health, my joy, my future. I give, yes, but only when I want to, and never because I'm being manipulated into it. And that pink dress in my closet? I didn't throw it away. I wore it to Eleanor's granddaughter's wedding. I danced in it. I laughed in it. And I realized that sometimes redemption doesn't come from the people you thought would give it, but from the ones you never expected. My name is Clara Williams. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love, honor, and protect is myself. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. And I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have kept paying, hoping for love, or would you have walked away like I did? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And while you're here, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story reaches, because if my story has taught me anything, it's this. No matter how late in life, freedom is always worth fighting for.